दोनों ओर के सैनिक पांसे की नोकों पर नर्तन करते अपने विरोधी को हराने के लिए आगे बढ़ते जा रहे हैं। प्रत्येक दिव्यास्त्र को उचित दिव्यास्त्र से रोका जा सकता है, लेकिन उनका चयन योद्धाओं की बुद्धि पर निर्भर है। कुरुक्षेत्र के इस युद्ध में क्या आप जीवित बच सकते हैं, इसका निर्णय भाग्य और योद्धाओं के कौशल के हवाले है। जानिए, आपको मिलती है वीरगति या बनते हैं सम्राट युधिष्ठिर के राज्य का हिस्सा। खेलिए महाभारत युद्ध पर आधारित यह रोचक खेल, रणभूमि कुरुक्षेत्र।
ठंडे पानी से नहलाती, ठंडा चंदन उन्हें लगाती, उनका भोग हमें दे जाती, फिर भी कभी नहीं बोले हैं, माँ के ठाकुर जी भोले हैं। नमस्कार। महादेवी वर्मा जी की ये पंक्तियाँ ठाकुर जी का उनके भक्तों के साथ कैसा संबंध होता है वो बहुत अच्छे से बयान करती हैं। तो किसी के लिए वो भाई बन जाते हैं, किसी के लिए वो मित्र बन जाते हैं, किसी के लिए ठाकुर जी प्रेमी बन जाते हैं, किसी के पुत्र बन जाते हैं। So we have always had a very intimate relationship, very close relationship with our Thakur ji. And today's story is very special because it is about Thakur ji, or we call him Srinath ji also. And we have with us Devamalya Day. He is construction. He heads construction operations in construction company in Bahrain, and he has interest in writing. He has written few books in the past, and right now we are here to talk to him about a recently published anthology, Flight of Deities. Flight of Deities is an anthology inspired by a book by the similar name, book by Meenakshi Jain ji. And this book is about the various attacks that our temples and our deities had faced from different invaders, different eras, and how these deities were saved from these invasions, and the temples were resurrected, sometimes at the same place, sometimes at a different place, and in this particular occasion, a place that was chosen by Srinath ji himself. So very interesting story from our history, and Devji has written this story in this anthology, Flight of the Deities, which you can buy and read it. It has 10 stories from different temples, the history of these temples, and the history of destruction and rebuilding of these temples. Very important history which many people do not know. So, Namaste Devamalya ji. Welcome to Kahi Suni. And in this episode, we will talk about your story, Thakur Ji's Promise. So before we get to the story, let's talk about little bit about yourself. Please tell our audience a bit about Dev and who Dev is, and how Dev got into writing, and specifically what inspired him to write this story. Over to you.
Thank you, Gauravji. So I always had, an atmosphere of literature in my house. My mother was MA in English literature, a lecturer, and my father, he was a mechanical engineer with a MA in Bengali. A very peculiar combination. So always, the atmosphere in my house was of literature and writing. And in class 5, around class 5, I was very much inspired by Tagore. And that time my motto in life was, if I can get the Nobel Prize in literature and things like that. We all have such, tall dreams. So I was always, into like when I feel like writing something, maybe a few lines of poem or some prose. But seriously, I took up writing when I moved out of my, adopted hometown, you can say, which is Mumbai, around 2015. So I moved to North India for an ITCT project, so in Lucknow. So that time, to make the best use of time, I decided I will post a story. I created a Facebook page. I will post a story every day. So that continued for 2 weeks. and then of course it became like bi-weekly, then monthly. So that was how I made it more of a hobby. And you can say the inflection point came around 2020 when I was selected from Indic Academy for the Writer Scholarship. So that was also a story on Sri Krishna, which has took elements from Mahabharata and woven it around our modern times. So short story called Recurrence. It is in my FB stories page. So for that story, I got the scholarship, and then like I mean, it was taking one through the ropes of writing. So normally, when one starts, maybe without an organized format, whatever comes in mind. So that's how I got attached with Indic Academy, and thereafter, when this particular anthology series was launched, I got very much interested. That time, I think COVID had started already. Yeah, COVID was in full swing, so I wanted to lay my hands on Meenakshi ji's book, but getting a copy from was not very much feasible. But still, I ordered a copy at home, and I asked my wife to send me, the contents page, and there I selected, okay, I'll focus on this aspect of all the images of Krishna being transferred from Vrindavan to different places. So, and the entire chapter she sent me as like screenshots and photo images. From there, I took up this particular, and then I started developing on it. So that's how has been my journey.
So, so Meenakshi ji's book actually I had recently acquired, and I think it's only available in hardcover. And I think everybody should read the book. It really enlightens us about various chapters of history, which, despite me calling myself a history buff, I was also not aware of many of those chapters. So, coming to the story of Srinath ji, and I would like to ask, because the book has so many episodes from Multan to Meenakshi, Madurai. What actually made you interested about the? You said you went through the glossary, you went through the title pages of the book, index
Mhm.
of the book, but what pulled you towards the story of Srinath ji? Is there any personal connection, or there is some story to that part as well?
Uh, the entire, that episode of history where, I mean, after this Farman of Aurangzeb was, I mean, put into practice or action. So all the Sevaites who from Vrindavan started taking out the images and to safe refuge in different parts of India. So that itself was very engrossing. And this particular story, so it had a that supernatural element. Why it stopped near that place, and I mean the events concerning that. So that appealed to me, and I felt probably I can weave something around it. And yeah, it was the first of kind, my attempt at you can say fictionized history or historical fiction. So to stay true to the different facts, while preserving the the sanctity of history, but weaving around the different elements. So yeah, so overall,
So,
that's bit of anecdote appeal to me, and of course then yeah.
have you been to Nathdwara or Vrindavan, Mathura, either of these places? Visited
Vrindavan,
the
Mathura, I
temple?
have been. Nathdwara is still on my, on my bucket list. I still don't didn't have the,
I think
yeah.
I
But
think
when my
after
story
this,
got selected,
I think
when my story
Nathdwara
got
will call you.
yeah, already see when I story got selected, I sent some some dakshina to the temple, like online only I can do. So it's
So
like my
I'm sure Srinath ji will call you soon. That is some signal that you have chosen to write about the abode of Srinathji. So,
Yeah.
coming to this farman that you touched upon, I think
Mhm.
our audience should know about what exactly was this farman and what is the significance of this, and what was the scale of this farman, this famous farman of Aurangzeb that you have mentioned
Mhm.
in your story also.
Yeah. So, the kind of iconoclast that Aurangzeb was. So he wanted to completely annihilate the culture of the land, the religion, and the existing, whatever our forefathers and everybody in Bharat had clung to for centuries and millennia. So it was basically, I mean, uh, if temple forms such an important part of like the civilization. So if you kind of attack the temples or uh, somehow destroy or dismantle it, the you hurt, you basically hurt the very essence of, or
Core.
fundamental part of our culture and religion. So it's not just the economy. So many people, and the full, the I mean, the entire civilization gets affected. So it was I mean, of course, a uh, well thought out plan to to attack and Hinduism and whatever our culture had stood for. So we're destroying all the Hindu temples which were there, and this was supposed to be carried out by his, the heads from the army and the people concerned involved. Yeah.
So, we often hear these days people claim that what is the importance of temple? Why don't we construct a hospital in its place? Why don't we construct an educational institute in these places? Clearly, Aurangzeb understood the importance of these temples and he targeted them. So, what modern people are not able to understand, and which clearly you also have understood. So I would like to know your views on this, the necessity and the need which the temples have served historically, as well as they continue to serve today, or they may continue to serve in future. If you can share your views on this topic around
Mhm.
temples and deities.
Yeah. So temples have always, formed the bedrock of our civilization for many millennia. Like there are, one is of course the deities which are like consecrated and enshrined in the concerned temple. So there's a whole lot of pilgrimage, people coming to visit. So with once that happens, the entire surrounding areas start developing. There are many meta businesses and industries which develop around a temple because of the pilgrimage part. Plus, temples were also, from time immemorial, involved in the dissipation of knowledge, education. The kings, they received, noble and the grants and from the kings. So these formed basically, uh, you can say uh, the center for dissipation of our culture. So knowledge education wise, plus the basically the entire Hindu community who, this pilgrimage is considered, of course, like there has been a culture of visiting temples, visiting these dhams. So this has been for a long time, and uh, when that happens, so temples, form that uh, form that definite skeleton or definite what you can say, the basis around which the culture permeates and the culture continues. So yeah, they have been. I mean, these have been for such a long time. Been able to uphold our cultural sanctity, our religious ethos, dissipation of our the traditional and classical education and knowledge.
I think
So that
these temple cities have, I'm saying historically also, if we look at it, these temple cities also were knowledge centers. So there was a clear connection between the temple being there, a large temple being there, and people coming there at a young age to study, and then continue coming there as a pilgrimage or as a ritual that helped both in terms of the dharma, arth, kam, all three purusharthas were being
yes,
taken care of through these activities, right? You had a desire to travel, you had a desire to see your deity, and you were getting educated there. There were these kathavachan, and these activities were continuously happening. The priests were explaining about the history of the temple, the origin, and it basically kept you rooted to your culture. That's what I believe. And
yeah,
nowadays, people have started treating temples as tourism, and that probably is hurting that connect to some extent. That's what my personal belief is, because nowadays we don't go there for knowledge or for a divine connect. We go there just to click selfies ki bhai main Kedarnath gaya tha, and maybe create 2 3 reels. That culture thoda sa, I mean, it hurts me, but I think there is the generational shift that is happening, and next generation is now getting more and more aware, and the flow of information is also very free. When we were growing up, the flow of information was not that free. You had to go out of your way to acquire books, to acquire literature that will help you know. So unless somebody was naturally driven, they would not know about these stories. But nowadays, anybody can download books on Kindle or access the archives on the government websites, etc., and find out a lot more than was accessible to us. So I think the books like Flight of Deities would also are also helping in that. So hopefully, and we as Sutradhar are also trying to do a lot of work in that direction. Hopefully, we will bring our next generation closer to our culture than our generation was. And you guys are also doing great work, and Indic Academy is also doing great work in that aspect. So coming to the very specific part of the this conversation, that is Srinathji, and people
hmm,
who follow Srinathji know what Srinathji means, and which image of Sri Krishna is being talked about. But people who do
hmm.
not follow Srinathji, for them, can you please explain which form of Sri Krishna is called Srinathji and or Thakurji for that matter?
It's basically the child form of Krishna, uh, and this has got definite history connection, which of course I mean I will not touch upon here. I will request the reader to buy and
Yes.
read the book. But yes, it is concerning the child form of Krishna.
So, so Srinath ji basically appeared at Mathura, right? That's what the story is, and
Mhm.
then he had to move from there after the Farman by Aurangzeb, and then that is where the history part also is there. What I gathered from your story, you have not bring in a lot of fiction in it. You have been very true to the historical facts, and the characters, etc., are the same you would find in the books of history. And
Mhm.
I think the difference between many other stories versus this story is, I found that this has a happy ending.
Mhm.
I mean, compared to many other stories which actually are not that happy ending, right? Here, Srinathji manages to find a proper abode for himself, and then you have tied in with the promise. can you at least talk about the promise, the title of the story? What is the promise you are talking about here? I mean, if you want to.
So, yeah. So legend has it that Krishna used to, little Krishna, so he used to play chopper with Ajab Kumari, the princess from Mewar, and he had to, of course, return back to Mathura. So then Ajab Kumari used to get very, heartbroken. So then Krishna made him a promise that he will come to Mewar, and
And settle there.
so that is kind of a legend, you can say, and that has been tied to the story that the I mean the different happenings and how history progresses and how things have uh, you know uh, moved on and happened over time. So actually, Srinathji has come close to Mewar to fulfill that millennia-old promise of his. Irrespective of, I mean, it's like, if you probably remove, all the, the dark part of history, like, the Ferman or whatever happened. So it's like the story is looked at from, if say for example, Srinathji or God or Ishwar. So from in his in his like what you can say,
It was
in
everything was
his,
planned.
yeah, in his grand scheme of things. So Aurangzeb is also like a nimitta. So
Yes.
that bigotry was like there so that his image can be moved out. So that's how basically.
So basically, a forced migration gets a happy nature when we tie it to that promise. It's not like that he was forced to move away from there. It's like he wanted to move away and
Yeah.
go towards Mewar because of a promise. So it basically, the dark chapter becomes something that, as you mentioned, something that was
Mm.
preordained and something that was destined to happen. And Aurangzeb just, that Farman just became as you said, nimitta for that to happen. And obviously, Jai Singh, I think Jai Singh played the role of bringing that
Yes.
fulfillment of that promise and fulfilling
Mm.
the whole migration. And he basically created an army to protect the migration. So and there is a very interesting part of this also, that while these kings did not want to antagonize Aurangzeb, but still they were rooted in their dharma. So they might yet be paying tribute to Aurangzeb, and they might yet be saying, okay, you are right, we will follow your dictats and all. But at the heart of it, they wanted to follow the dharma, and they wanted to preserve their dharma. So it seems like they basically chose whatever was right to survive against all odds. And in that process, they did not forget their origin, they did not forget where their dharma lied. And I mean, as the story goes, they lied to Aurangzeb, right? That कि
Yeah.
भाई, your farman has been taken care of, don't worry, don't come here. Stay there in Delhi. आप वहां एंजॉय करिए, इधर मत आइए, आपकी कोई जरूरत नहीं, आपका हमने सब टेक केयर कर लिया. Essentially, that was the sense of it. So that also shows that it is not all black and white. We can't say ki falana and falana was traitor, falana and falana was good, falana guy was bad, they sided with the Mughals, they sided with so and so. I think there we have not lived that history, so we cannot judge those people or judge the actions of the people on during those times. While some may come across as very straightforward, there are plenty who chose their whatever best they could, right, in their wisdom. So instead of judging them as a historical figure, we should rather try and appreciate the effort, whatever they could preserve. Uh, and the odds were all stacked against them, to be honest, right? You can't just say that the life was hunky dory, and we were all living. Recently I read somebody's tweet about mocking Jawhar, and they were saying, ki, okay, so do you think if a woman gets kidnapped today, she should commit suicide? Or and my response to that was, please understand that in these times, if somebody gets kidnapped, the entire world is out there to protect her, to is on her side, right, to rescue her. Vis-a-vis, when the Jawhar was being committed, the entire world was against them. Their husbands have died in the battlefield. The invader is coming. They don't know what will happen to them. So they chose what they chose because of whatever the conditions were, and it's very, difficult would be an easy word. It is impossible to imagine those conditions because we have been living in such a situation ourselves. So, anyways, sometimes we need to read history with a lot more nuances, and maybe read multiple sources, multiple perspective before we judge them. But in this process, we got a famous city, Nathdwara, and Nathdwara is a city in Rajasthan, and that is, we call it the abode of Srinathji, and all the devotees of Srinathji must be visiting it, and this is where, like we have Kashi Vishwanath associated with Shivji, uh, Mathura Vrindavan is associated with Srikantji, and somehow the Srikantji has also staked claim to all over the country. Went to Dwarka, lived there, staked claim there, and then after he had uh, left the earth, went to his heavenly abode. So through his Leela, he chose Nathdwara as another abode for himself. And it's an interesting story. I believe everybody should read this story, both the history of it as well as the story that Devamalya ji has written in the book Flight of the Deities. So Devamalya ji, the I think the history part we have talked about, the story we have talked about. I want to also understand this the process that you had gone through while writing the story, the anthology, because there are multiple authors writing multiple stories, and I'm sure you would have had some workshops, some get-togethers or whatever. So can you please talk us through with your experience of the journey of writing this anthology?
So, firstly, this this type of project, like historical fiction or a fiction based on history, I had never done it before. So the first thing, one of the first things I did was, okay, uh, I have, I feel inclined to do this or write for this, but I, one thing I did, I mean, it may sound funny here, or people may not believe, but initially, it's like, there is in the Gita, it says like you uh, submit the fruits of your action at the feet of God. So I it's like mentally, it's like told Srinathji that I'm not up for it. This is your story. I'm just a vehicle. So accordingly, guide me. So after that, when I met that, mentally, I took that resolve, or submitted myself. So several things happened, which was in a sense, I can say, miraculous. For example, I never had the tenacity or the patience to write a 4,000, 5,000 word story. I mean, I had never done this before. If you even look at my FB pages, I always used to write micro stories, like one page. So I
300,
mean, in a quick
400 words.
sentence, you convey something. But this was something like 4,000, 5,000 means, every day after work, I will sit for 2 3 hours. One is I will study, and then of course there was time devoted for study, and then of course to write. Study essentially, like there's Todd's annals for Rajasthan, so I studied that in deep. Especially what I wanted to come very accurate and precise is in terms of the detailing. detailing, for example, the kind of flags or banners the army used that time, the food an ordinary army man may be eating from Rajasthan that time, the kind of weapons they are using. So all those I had to be, as close to accurate as possible, like as it is mentioned in history. So those details I had to refer to. For that I did study about, Todd's annals. And of course, on the Pushti Marg also I studied. So because I'm writing about, the venerable Ishwar of Pushti Marg, so I must know how the relationship of
Yes.
in the people who have upheld Pushti Marg had with this Srinathji, or the child form of Krishna. So all these was happening, and even I'll tell you, here I am connected to several expat communities of from Bharat. um, there were places in the story where I needed, to get the, to enrich the flavor, the proper Mewari dialect. I mean, say I have
Hmm.
one character is
Yeah, you have
speaking
used
some.
it. Yes.
So then I referred back to my this expat community, and a few of them were from Mewar, and I gave them, deadline. I need these by this, so I gave them the dialogues. They translated in Mewari and gave it back to me. So, uh, I mean, the kind of help which poured into me was immense. So that's why I say this is, I'm just being a vehicle for this. It is his story, and it's just, through me it has come out. That's all I can say. Process wise,
So,
the workshops and all, what you were saying, there hadn't been any such workshops initially. It happened after we gave the, submitted the story, and the
hmm.
first cut was made. So people were selected, and then there was a very rigorous process of the editing part, for which, Otis Hashmer, he's uh, a senior fellow from Stanford. So we had one-to-one sessions with him. So he came back with the corrections and or suggestions. So it gave a whole lot of, insight into how uh, actually. I mean, see, when you are probably picturizing something, the way you may want to, tell the story is different from when you want to tell it in text form. In text
Correct.
form, you always follow a chronology. In picture form, you may, want to show the present, the go back, flashback, again come forward. So all those that aspect is not followed in text form. So a lot of those insights came from him, and it was really good. So few rounds of editing happened, and yeah, so it was overall an amazing journey.
So you have rightly pointed out. I keep telling my team that when you write something, the writing for audio medium is different than it is for video, is different than it is for text. You can't just pass on the same text across all three mediums. It does not connect in the same manner. And similarly, like if you are doing a katha that genre, although it is audio, but since you are present in an interactive form, that also changes, right? And
Mhm.
we recently had that fallout this Mr. Manoj Muntasir has been facing, because you are saying nahi kathawachak log to aise hi bolte. अरे कथावाचक as a medium is different. What a कथावाचक is saying cannot be seen as shown as a dialogue from Hanumanji. So
Mhm.
this being true to the medium, and I actually then tweeted about this, that when I was a kid, I had a teacher who was a very famous poet, Hindi poet, and he used to teach us that you have to, at least whenever you are writing anything, you should take care of three things: desh, kal, or bhasha. Geographical location where you are setting it up, the period in history where you are setting it up, or maybe futuristic, sci-fi, whatever, and language, what language they would be using. If these three are not consistent, the text that you will produce would not be as good, and you have to go through great length to uh, connect with your Mewari friends to basically get the bhasha right, which something maybe Manoj Muntasir had done, he would not have to face this fallout. But coming back to this youth, Devji. So I think these days, what my personal experience is that a lot of people, a lot of young people want to write historical fiction as well as Puranic fiction. I don't call it mythological fiction, but that is the popular name. I call it Puranic fiction for obvious reasons. So, what is your advice to these people who want to start, because you have just been through that journey? Something that helped you, something that you want them to do to get it right. If there are few words you can talk to them about.
Mhm. So one is, deciding on the subject. So the subject should be very clear in one's mind what exactly one wants to write, and there is a format for developing a storyline. So like intro, and then like the first major uh, incident or something, a second one, and then a climax. So put it in that format. It's if I can recall correctly, it's a, uh proper storyboarding format developed by a famous personality,
Scott Myers.
Frenator. Yes. Yeah. So that format one can put it one story in,
There is a book
and
called Save the Cat. I think that details the story structure. I don't know whether you are referring to
there are
that.
several, but this one is like pretty simple and anybody can use it. So that is one, and if one is delving into Puranic or historical, a lot of study is required. So it can't be done without studies. So maybe several sources, and like it's some there's a saying like if you're devoting 90% of your time, maybe 10% you devote to writing. So it's like after you have assimilated all that, so probably you are able to devote your time to the writing. So uh, internalizing all those things and assimilating very much required, where you are writing on based on something like history or our culture, like that. So if not, then it will be something like what you mentioned about, or
So,
yeah.
so what are your views on creative liberties when talking writing about such subject matter?
um, See, liberties. I'm pretty much Puritan in this aspect. So, if it has to refer to some particular period of history, so as I told you, I would like to provide all those associated details which go with it, to bring out that period in more detail. uh, I can probably, in terms of some characters or some side characters, so those nuances. So basically, in terms of the different characters, probably I can bring in some liberty, but even with respect to the dialogues they speak. So if I'm referring to a particular region, I would like to bring out, that time what kind of how they spoke and how the dialect was, delivered and shared amongst people. So that essentially gives you a sense that it is a slice of time, kind of. So I am more into that. So
So,
I
no,
feel more yeah.
I completely agree with you on this because my belief is that history is a good tool to teach you a lot of lessons, right? And when we distort it, when we try to take too many liberties around it and change the core essence of the story, we actually end up teaching the wrong message. And that is what prompted us to start a series called Mythbusters. So whenever we come across these myths about Mahabharata, we would create a video that this is what is not there in the core text, and these are probably later folklores or for some people with some nefarious agenda who tried to peddle these lies. But our belief is that history or our Puranic text or Itihas, Ramayana, Mahabharata, they have a lot of scope where these stories can be created, right? Where there are these blank slates, like for example, Satyaki's character. You a very important character, but he is not central to Mahabharata. But keeping that character intact and the core of that character intact, you can take few liberties around the activities he might have done, which are not there recorded, right? He had a long life. So those kind of liberties I am okay with, but when it comes to telling the story from the core context, my uh, the insistence to my team is always to do proper research. Almost everyone in my team has read Mahabharata and Ramayana from Valmiki's Ramayana. And whenever we try to present a story, we try to be as close to the original source as possible, even if it is at the cost of the popular narrative. So if the popular narrative says Kikarn was very good, he showed mercy when he was killing Abhimanyu, my story would not say that. In my story, Dushasan's son killed Abhimanyu through his gada. It was Karn who basically was party to it, and he was not very sad and crying as you see in TV serials. So the idea is that I mean, it is to all the audience members. If you are interested in consuming this kind of content, these stories are available on Sutradhar app. We have more than 200 hours of content, all sourced from Ramayana, Mahabharata, various Puranic texts, and we always refer to the unabridged versions of these texts published through reputed sources. And as Devji pointed out, it is advisable to be close to the original source and not deviate too much from it. So, coming back to Devji, this is my last question, and if the audience is interested in asking few questions, they can type in right now because we are running out of time. So, this question, Devji, is for you, and this is about what future holds. I mean, can we expect more such stories from you, and if you have already started working on something or planning to start something on the similar lines?
Yeah, there is certain some project, rather I would say two projects which are uh, very close to my heart. One I can say is like my dream project. So yeah, because of my work pressures, I'm not able to devote much time. But very soon I want to ensure these get completed and see the light of the day.
So a segue to another question. Sorry, I said it would be last question, but how do you manage to find time? You mentioned that you have a lot of work, right? And
Hmm.
most of the new authors I had mentioned in my earlier questions, they would always be doing something other or the other, right? They would always be doing some day job, some business or whatever they are doing. And so, how do you manage to find time to do this? And especially, I have three kids, so after doing my day job, I have to take care of those kids also. So there are some mantras that you would want to give me in managing time.
So it's one of the main things is setting your personal goals. So like for 2022 I had like I will okay at least I mean I had the subjects also ready, four books, so the first one I mean fully mine, so there were co-authored books earlier. So first one, it had to be because Bengali is my native language. So an anthology of poems in Bengali to start with, then an anthology of poems in English, then these two projects which I told you. So somehow I completed those two, but the other two are still like pending. So it's like you as it is said, you aim for the stars, you will probably reach somewhere
Land on
in
the
between.
moon.
Yeah. So that
So
is one,
great.
and yeah, and one more thing is like you were saying how to manage time. So when I actually make up my mind, like when I did this work, wrote for this particular anthology, after I came from work, I will just refresh myself, take some small stuff, and then I will just put my phone, mobiles, and everything away, and I'll just focus. So 2-3 hours every day, like that, continuously for I think 20-30 days I gave on it. So whole lot of
So I think
discipline is
giving up
required.
phone is giving up phone for few hours is the key, I think, because that
Yeah,
in our times that is the biggest distraction that people find around. So it was great talking to you, Devji. For our audience, our next session would be on Meenakshi Temple, a chapter from the history of Meenakshi Temple, Sunday to 2nd of July. And thank you so much, Devji. Thank you for being with us, and thank you for sharing your insights. Dhanyawad.
thank you, Gauravji.